This is the Career Grow Podcast. I'm Krishna. Today I'm joined by Ashish Agarwal. Ashish is a well known technology leader. He has been the CTO at Micromax, he has been the Senior Vice President at Flipkart. Ashish was my skip level leader at Amazon when I was at Amazon Seattle. Ashish is one of the most innovative people I have met in my entire career. The first time I went to Ashish's office, I was mind blown because Ashish had a wall full of puzzle pieces. At Amazon, you got a blue puzzle piece when your patent was approved by the patent office. I have three of these, but Ashish had a wall full of these puzzle pieces. It was super inspiring to see that. Now let's go have a chat with Ashish on the career lessons from his 25 years in the industry.
Really excited to be here, Krishna. Thank you for that humble intro. That wall, was 14 years of work at Amazon. So thank you for that humble intro.
So let's start with a fun fact about you.
Okay, it's a fun fact, it's scary as well. I started to learn surfing before I learned how to swim. So a tip for the audience, do not do that.
My audience is mainly engineers and leaders. How did you get here?
Look, I spent my first 14 years of career journey at Amazon, and that's where you and I met, Krishna. That was an amazing journey. When I joined Amazon, this was back in early 2000, late 99. I did a small startup late 99 as well. But when I joined Amazon, that was because the startup wasn't going anywhere. And I was like, okay, maybe I should get a real job. And that's how I ended up Amazon. I never imagined that I would spend 14 years there. Um, as a hands-on engineer, I loved. At that time, Amazon was doing Amazon mobile commerce, and this was, if you reflect back in time, right, 2000, that year, phones were still VAP phones. So, the 9-digit triple tap to type letters, and Amazon was starting to do mobile commerce on those phones. So, it was, always wanting to be on the cutting edge is what inspired me to join it.
Have been a scary time. 2000 is a .com burst. There's amazing time to join Amazon.
Correct. It was a scary time. Absolutely right. Amazon was what 2,000 people back then, fairly small. And now I heard, that in the last year and a half, they've hired over 500,000 people. So I was enjoying a ton, and just the time flew by. One thing after another, one exciting thing after another, I should say. From working on, mobile commerce to working on affiliate marketing on Amazon, and then somehow it led to being the first dev lead and the first dev manager on some of the AWS services as well. So that was super exciting and fun. Learned a lot working with, closely with Andy and, some of the other leaders there. Especially, just the obsessive focus on customers, obsessive focus on, operational excellence, and really working with, the rest of teams at Amazon, where early on AWS wasn't really a priority back in like 2003, 2004, when we first launching it. It was just another small project on the side. And you would go to other internal teams to talk about things you would need from them, and they would just brush you off. It was super exciting, just learning, going through that journey. And of course, where you and I met was, I believe, when we were doing external payments web service, and launching that was super fun. It's very different beast than launching in AWS and having people come use it. Launching a payments was a lot more compliance, lot more chasing merchants, because there was already a few big players in the market.
Yeah, when you mentioned Andy and the early days of AWS, for the audience, Ashish is talking about Andy Jassy, who's today the CEO of Amazon. So, Ashish, you had a great experience working with Andy Jassy at the early days of AWS. If you could share some stories around that.
Absolutely. We had launched one of the first services. It was called e-commerce web service. And, the way at that time, it was very rough skunkworks project. So we would launch a service, there would be bugs, customers would be reporting to us, and we would go, log into the production machines to fix them. And when Andy came in, it was a lot around just rigor and operational excellence as opposed to just logging in, going and fixing it. We were having lots of outages back then as well.
Mm.
And his perspective was, nobody will adopt services unless we stop having these. So, it was through a lot of beating, I should say, that we learned how to operate that in a lot more rigorous manner, like a professional service.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I've heard like stories where Andy Jassy sits in all operational review meetings,
right.
and it feels like a fancy role. Hey, Andy Jassy, kind of inventor of AWS, but he was on the ground floor doing all the operational reviews and
Correct.
yeah. So,
And some of those operational reviews is where I learned a ton from, just hearing his perspective around how we have to be focused, how we have to have rigor and process around it. And I think after 14 years, just time just flew by, working on, AWS, payments, web services, checkouts and payments. And then my last role at Amazon, just, leading game services, product and engineering, GM. I think, time just flew by and I didn't really realize it was 14 years I spent there till one of my former bosses from Amazon earlier on from both mobile and early parts of AWS pulled me into his startup,
mm,
running tech for him. And,
mm,
I think his pitch to me, other than it being an awesome company and on a cutting edge, was, hey, look, if this does not work out, both of us can go back to Amazon and get a job there. I'm like, okay.
yeah.
So that's how I ended up actually leaving Amazon, was, him pulling me into his startup. And that was, when I left Amazon, I had not realized, Amazon had grown so much. And it was, so when I joined that startup, it was very similar to what Amazon was when I joined 14 years ago. So super fast paced, fun, just loved iterating, launching products quickly. So, so as my career journey, what led to my next roles was just that. When it was time for a change, I start looking for places that are fun and exciting,
Mm,
which is really the right combination of, where there's a learning opportunity as well as challenging,
mm,
but at the same time, time to do something which you can reflect back and say, that was fun. You actually enjoyed doing it. You made something, which made actually a difference, which tons and tons of people use it. So that is what, between that and my desire to move to India, move to Micromax. And the reason I picked Micromax was largely because they are, at that time, they were one of the biggest smartphone manufacturers in India.
right.
And I loved their innovation innovation mindset in the smartphone space.
Mm,
So they practically introduced dual SIM phones to India, 30-day battery. So I like their focus on solving very India specific problems.
right.
And the role I took up there was to really take up, just the vision of building a hardware and software connected ecosystem that tackles India specific problems.
Got it.
Built a ton of stuff there. Then, Flipkart, having worked with founders of Flipkart at Amazon, ended up working at Flipkart. And, Flipkart is one of the companies which actually started the startup revolution in
In
India,
India. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Before Flipkart, if you remember, there were practically no startups in India. Nobody wanted to be a startup founder in India.
Correct. Flipkart made startup school in India.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
Right. And after that, now everybody wants to be a startup in India.
Yeah.
And then, after Flipkart, I ended up joining Ayla. It's an IoT company. And I think about IoT as really just the next evolution of computing. So, earlier in the days, there used to be mainframes. The university would have one. Then desktops and laptops came around. The houses and people will have one. Mobile phone came around. Everybody has one or a couple.
Yeah.
And then IoT, people are going to have lots and lots of these edge computing devices. So I saw that as an evolution of computing, which is why it sounded exciting. So I think what I look for is really just fast-paced, innovative workplace, but there's just a ton of opportunity to make a difference.
Wow, love that lens. I also really loved something that you touched upon, where you had a sort of like a risk mitigation strategy. Also, you talked about, hey, if this fails, Amazon would be happy to take me back, right? So the fear of the unknown really holds people back when I talk to a lot of people.
Correct.
And having this A/B kind of a plan, that the framework that you had was really amazing. Can you talk about that? Like, what was your mental model when you decided to take such big risks?
Yeah. So that wasn't my mental model, frankly, to be fair.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to take credit for it, but it was essentially the mental model of the person who was pulling me into his startup. Uh, and that resonated with me just like it resonated with you,
Right,
which is, the reason people don't um, take risk is people don't realize, um, what's a one-way door versus what's not,
right,
right?
yeah,
And when he used that framework with me, I realized, what, it is maybe not a one-way door. If I try it out, if I like it, I can stay there. If I don't, or if it fails, you know, I can go back. So I think that's what, yeah.
this is awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So one common pattern, I'm asking this because I'm not seen a good answer across this from industry leaders. So because you have seen kind of both sides of the world, and because you have worked at very senior levels, so one common pattern I see is that as people think of their career ladders, and especially as you grow in your scope and in your level, your career journey, especially in leadership, there are fewer and fewer leadership positions at the top. People start to plateau at certain levels. What would you recommend for people who feel stuck at some level, want to grow, break the ceiling per se?
It's That's an interesting question. It's really about asking yourself, why do you want to climb the ladder? And there's several thoughts that come to mind, but let me start with one at least,
Yeah,
which is, and I don't know your audience, and I'm slightly digressing from the topic to be non-career related.
yeah,
So filter out if you need to. But
yeah.
there are lots of beautiful talks, TED talks on the topic of what really matters.
Mm,
You know, and the playlist on that topic by monks, by philosophers, even physicians and tech leaders. And most of them have no mention of a career ladder in any of them,
right,
right? And one thing I'll tell you that is true for most human beings, all we want to do is just be happy.
right,
And we think career ladder will get us there,
right.
right? And if I reflect back on my career, and if I'm sure you and other leaders will do as well. Last time you got a promo, how long did it make you happy for before you started thinking about the next one?
Yeah, it was less than 2 months for me.
Exactly right. Right. It's usually a couple of weeks
Yeah,
before people start feeling happy about that.
yeah,
Yeah. So what we really want to do is really just do something meaningful that makes a difference, and that is what's true for me. And if you look at the rubric I've used to make career moves, it's really all around that, doing what matters most to you, and more importantly, enjoying what you're doing and learning from it. um, so the places I have moved is where I get to learn a ton, or to help others, to make a difference. Focus on that.
yeah.
I actually took up, um, when I was in India, I started advising a few startups 8-10 years ago, and I
Mm,
loved that. It was all around helping others with you know not that much incentive.
mm,
And it's just the something around helping people who are in a stage where you could actually make a difference to them was super exciting, more than anything else.
wow. Yeah.
So I
Well,
think to answer you now, coming back to your career ladder questions, I think think about, it's really just what motivates you, what do you want to do, and focus on that as opposed to career ladder. And have patience.
yeah.
You know, I know patience. There's a saying. I forget the exact one, but patience pays slowly.
Mm.
But it eventually does.
Got it. Yeah,
It might
this
be
is
a little.
such a great answer, Ashish. Thanks for doing that. Where you took a step back and took a look at the meaning. What are we really after? when we are looking for career growth, ultimately it boils down to happiness. Such a
Correct.
great perspective. Thanks for sharing that.
I think it takes time in and age to realize that, I guess.
Right. And few gray hairs. So
Exactly. Lots of gray hair.
let's switch to a different topic around leadership and judgment. One of the signs of growth is you start developing good judgment, right? So ultimately, we are getting paid to make good decisions at
Mhm.
work. So, any suggestions around how do we build good judgment as an engineer and as a leader?
Yeah. The judgment is really of two kinds, but the kind I'm going to focus on is which is really a skill,
Hmm.
which essentially means, it gets better with practice. The framework that I use, and I touched briefly on it, which is how do you figure out where to practice it, is essentially figuring out which of them is a reversible decision with least impact, or which one of them is a one-way door.
Hmm.
So being able to identify and isolate this helps practice decision making in low risk situations.
Hmm.
And there are a bunch of other things, tools that you can use to help that as well. um, one of them is really all of us have personal biases.
Right.
um, right, just being aware of the fact that we have a personal bias that is causing us to make this decision.
Hmm.
It doesn't mean you have to go change it. It's just being aware that there is some personal bias helps a lot. It's easier said than done, but just recognizing that there's a bias there.
Right.
The second thing that helps us, active listening when you're talking about whatever the problem is that I'm trying to make a decision on with other audience. And that's where keeping your personal bias aside and practicing active listening helps a lot. Um, what else have I used? I think another thing I would suggest is really getting coaching or mentors. And I think the thing I love about mentors is really they provide you a most unbiased perspective
Hmm.
because they have no incentive in there other than to just help you,
Right.
other than help you learn, help you grow, help share their experiences. Um, so they really have no other incentive in there, which is why people always tell you get a mentor who is not in your org chain,
Right.
is because then he has no other incentive other than just to purely help you. So seeking coaching from others when you need it. So I think these are some of the things, just practicing is really what helps you build any skill.
Thanks for sharing that perspective. So you touched upon practicing this in low risk situations, building that muscle, treating it as a skill, right? So first thing is like uh, judgment is not inborn; it's a skill that you develop. That's the first mindset that you shared. How do you go about practicing this on a daily basis?
Yeah,
Because there are probably in an year, if you look at it, in an year you are probably making 5 6 big decisions.
correct.
But how do you practice for it on a
Correct.
daily level?
Correct. So the big ones are probably irreversible ones or high cost ones,
Right.
but they're daily decisions. Some of them can call them choices, but they're daily decisions that you make on a everyday basis. Is this project green or red? Most projects are either red or yellow. Great.
Yeah.
What level do you need to move to impact that? What's the right decision? And
Yeah.
then practicing, taking your personal biases out on every single, like on a daily level, you make lots and lots of these small decisions.
Right.
I'm calling them small, but they're still meaningful.
Correct.
So that is where you can actually practice some of these things, asking people, what do you think we should do? And practicing active listening there, keeping your, biases aside, asking a coach or a mentor, just lots of these things.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. Because you are from Amazon, like this leadership principle of "R right a lot" is probably very relevant here. I really love the quote from Jeff saying, "People who are right a lot change their mind a lot as well."
Okay.
Right. So, because the world is so complex, things change so fast.
Correct.
The ability to change your mind is also a great point. Yeah.
Correct.
Thanks for sharing this perspective.
Yeah. And that is, if it just goes um, to broader skills as a leader, right? Judgment is one of them. But finally, I think what briefly what you touched on was really just humility and curiosity, right? because you might have your own bias, but when you're curious, you talk to other people, you hear their perspective, and then you are humble enough to say, I don't know, and I'm willing to ask other people, right? And which is what causes people, or leaders who are right a lot, to change their mind a lot, is because they have this curiosity and humility, which kind of go hand in hand. um, so that and that is what causes you to change your mind a lot as well.
Right.
Is as you learn different perspectives, you realize, what I had was my personal bias before, and now I actually have a more informed opinion of what the situation is.
Yeah. I love the humility aspect and the truth seeking aspect, and then trying to prove I am wrong. Like, I'm here to seek the truth.
Correct.
Amazing. Thanks for that perspective.
Yeah.
So if you look at, you've seen probably a lot of leaders. So what are the core skills that matter for a leader? For someone who aspires to be a leader, maybe an engineer or a manager today who aspires to be a senior leader, what are the skill sets they should be focusing on, uh, practicing on a daily basis, so that they have a higher shot of becoming a good leader?
I've always put empathy at the top of that list. I mentioned curiosity and humility, and we'll touch about that as well. But empathy to me goes at top of that, largely because it enables you to connect with others.
Hmm.
It enables you to understand other people. Put yourself kind of in their mindset, their frame of thinking. Be it about understanding what's motivating them, or be it about understanding what's not motivating them. So just having that as a skill is super important.
Hmm.
And of course, the next one I would put in is really just curiosity and humility, which always, you're curious about how people are working, you're curious about, why they're motivated or not, just goes very closely with empathy as well. And finally, I think, where it all ties together is, I think, what I call as adaptability as a leader, or situational leadership as a leader.
Hmm.
Um, Largely because, if you are empathetic towards people, if you are willing to listen to them and curious around what motivates them, you will realize very quickly that there is no one style of leadership that fits all. Some people need different things, and even people need different things at different points of time.
Hmm.
And hence, which is why adaptability or situational leadership, or whatever you want to call it, comes in. And that is where you can actually practice a lot. You can go out of your we all have a natural styles.
Hmm.
But just understanding who you're talking to, looking at what they need from you as opposed to what you need from them, and going out of your comfort zone to try a different style, and practicing that kind of style till that also comes naturally to you, as opposed to just your natural style. So the analogy I use is, when you have a hammer, instead of trying to see everything as a nail, try to actually see things differently, and see what tool can you use there, as opposed to how can you use your hammer there.
Such a great analogy there. I totally resonate there. Like, there are things that come naturally to me, and I try to force fit that into every situation. As I'm growing, I'm trying to learn, hey, what other tools are out there, and how can I apply those tools instead of just forcing my tool for the situation. Really appreciate that perspective.
Yeah. And the last one is really just feedback. Thinking about feedback as a gift, right? And this is where, earlier on in my career, I had this problem too, and lots of people have it as well, which is, people naturally get defensive when somebody gives them feedback. And just really learning to use feedback as a gift and internalizing it, because when somebody is giving you feedback, they are actually taking a huge risk as well to give you that feedback. So really understanding that person's perspective, the reason that person is giving you feedback is so that you can get back better. We all have blind spots, right? When you're driving just like that, you all have blind spots. We are not aware of it. So that's the reason, just learning to understand feedback as a gift, and learning how to ask for feedback so that the other person can actually give you feedback. So I think those are the skills I would put together, if you would ask me.
Thanks for sharing that. These are, we covered a lot of ground there with that question. Really appreciate that.
No worries.
So, is there anything that you tell your younger self, who's early in the career, uh, with the benefit of hindsight now? What would you tell your younger self to either have like a more happy career, or like to have growth at a faster pace? You can pick wherever you want, whichever way you want to answer this. But what would you tell your younger self about approaching career?
Lots of things. I think some of them I've already touched on here.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can recall some or all of them. At least one of them is, really just take more risks.
Mm.
Have a backup plan, but take more risk. I
Mm.
think you put it nicer than I did,
Yeah.
but that's definitely one of them. The second one is get a mentor early on. Hugely helpful. I've realized it, and I think we touched upon this briefly as well. It's really about patience. Patience ultimately pays off, but it usually does it slowly.
Yeah.
Uh,
Playing
so
the long term game.
correct.
Yeah.
Just taking a long view on things. Just being patient is super important as opposed to trying to think about career ladders and whatever else.
Can you talk about like who are the key people who had the most influence on your career?
That's a tricky question. Lots of people. The reason I'm saying is
Yeah.
lots of leaders from Amazon and Flipkart and places where I've worked at. Seeing them practice leadership principles every day. Various mentors I've had, peers I've worked with. Let me try to think of some names if that's what you're looking for.
So,
Yeah,
names, or like whatever. Like if you don't want to pick names, it's okay. Like you can tell like what are the key things that you learned from them. Like what are the
absolutely.
most
Yeah,
useful things that you learned from
exactly. I think um, one of my early managers at Amazon, I learned the value of just hard work.
them?
He was super hardworking.
Mm.
I think another one I learned really from Kumar as well
Mm.
in payments.
Right.
Just how to drive almost anything and
Mm.
everything without knowing much about it. Right?
Mm.
Just how do you start peeling the layers of the onion and going deeper, and learning and driving it. Right?
Yeah.
You know, talked about Andy a little bit earlier, which is how do you just be super operationally, just focused on operational excellence and customers, right? What customers want, and operational excellence. Just diving deep, understanding it. Another one in payments was, Shavana. How do you really just get stuff done?
Mm.
Just, figure out whatever it is and just get it done. A couple of leaders of Flipkart, which was all around how do you break down almost anything logically to its simplest pieces.
Mm.
So, just a framework for decision making.
First
So
principles thinking, getting things to first principles. Yeah.
exactly, just
Wow.
break down practically everything. I've seen them do it a few times. Piyush was one of them. So super interesting things.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we'll switch to a different topic. That
Okay.
section of the discussion was really helpful around career growth. We'll probably look at future of career in tech, right? So with the advancements in AI, like it's only accelerating, and now we are getting to see all the advancements that has been happening and kind of compounding over the years. I think Chat GPT is one of the most influential things here, because it is people are getting to play with it, and they are really appreciating the advancements. So, what do you expect the future to look like? Future of people in tech.
Interesting. I think Chat GPT is certainly, very interesting and mind blowing. It was always a matter of when, not if, right?
Right.
Uh, if you just look at the simple AI evolution from Google searches to Alexas and Google Homes and Siris answering questions to NLP and AI. So, I think long term, what you're trying to touch on, there'll be AI practically everywhere. There's AI in autonomous driving, in warehouses, in robots, in deliveries, and we've all seen Minority Report, where it ultimately gets to.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think AI will actually move from finding simple answers, um, which is what ChatGPT does at this point,
Mm.
which is doing simple tasks which humans can do. I'm calling them simple, but they're essentially tasks that humans can do, which is be it writing code or writing an essay or finding an answer on a topic. To I call it descriptive use cases,
Mm.
which is all around data aggregation and data mining to aggregate information and present them slightly differently, right? Two, from descriptive, it's going to move to predictive, which is about using statistical models and correlations and forecasting techniques to understand those past trends and derive insights about the future. To prescriptive, which is from descriptive to predictive to prescriptive, which is all around, and once you start using optimizations and simulation algorithms on predictive, you can almost say, hey, look, what should you do if you want that outcome? So I think, AI is going to be long-term, it'll be everywhere. But we have lots and lots of unanswered questions that we still have to explore, from ethics and moral implications of it to, decision making, which will, do lots of things. So from a career standpoint, what I would suggest is really people should, we should all figure out how do we get ahead of that? How do we, get ourselves well versed in that? Because really we'll have to embrace it at some point. Either we be a co-creator of it, and be a part of that, so we actually have a chance to influence it, or we just be blown away by it because somebody else is doing it.
Right.
So I think from a career standpoint, that's what I would suggest is really let's all figure out how do we embrace and how do we be a part of it more than anything else.
Thanks for sharing that perspective. Yeah, there is essentially no point fighting it or resisting it. Figuring out how you can embrace it.
And you should be embrace it and contribute it.
Yeah.
Be a part of that.
Yeah.
Evolution long term.
Thank you. So let's go to a different section around productivity. How do you stay productive? I know managing such a large organization with so much complexity. What are your favorite productivity tips? I'm not looking for hacks here, but like fundamental things that you do differently. I know some background about you, how you prioritize health and part. So if you could share some things that you do so that you are productive. What makes you productive?
It's really a combination of prioritizing what you want to do. You talked about health, when we were at Amazon, we used to run and a bunch of other things, but it's all around prioritizing what you want to do. One of my productivity tips is all around just writing down what you want to do. A simple checklist, a simple to-do list. I have noticed, at least for me, it goes a long way to get things done. There's a pleasure in checking off things you have done.
Yeah.
Simple pleasures of life.
Yeah.
But this is definitely, it gives you that feeling of you have accomplished these things. There might be a few that are remaining that you might put off to tomorrow, but at least what you've gotten done. And you can use that, just the past memory of, okay, is that good enough or for today, or is it not? It kind of prevents you from procrastinating as well. Look, today you didn't do as much as you did a few days ago, or whatever else. So I think that's comes down to prioritization as well as just writing down what you want to get done.
Thanks for sharing that. We'll come to conclude the amazing session here. So what did I not ask you? What is the one question that you wish I had asked that you would love to answer?
But then I would love to answer as well. Okay, so I'll have to answer it too. I think one thing which I would like to share with the audience anyway, which is what are the few things that I've learned over my career, and how do I practice them?
Yeah,
there are lots of other questions I would have loved to ask, but given your audience, that's probably where I'll go.
Yeah. So that's a really good thread there. Please, would love to hear that answer.
So I think a few things I've learned, I think mostly from Amazon, learning from Amazon and practicing at lots of other places, including Amazon. One is customer obsession. When we were launching the payments web service, when we were launching the website, Andy was reviewing every single word that we were going to put on the product page. And not once, not a few times, several iterations of it. The message was loud and clear. Customer experience matters.
Right.
And that's where we should spend our time.
Right.
So customer obsession around that, customer obsession around metrics, focus on what's important, focus on figuring out what the metrics are a priority for the customers, so you can stay in touch with the customer. And same thing, customer experience of using the product, which is why reviewing every single word on every single page. The second one, I think you mentioned this, which is long-term thinking. How do you set up for long-term success so you're not making short-term trade-offs? Be it on architecture as an engineer, or features as a product, or um, goals as engineering leader. It's all around ownership.
Yeah.
Thinking about that, how this will not be somebody else's problem one day. That's the biggest strain of ownership, is it'll always be a problem. So might as well just solve it first the right way, right way, as opposed to punting it to the future,
Right.
hoping that it'll go away,
Right.
or it'll be somebody else's problem. So I think
Right.
long-term thinking is super important. And finally, it's all around, just delivering results.
Hmm.
Ultimately, that is what matters. Focus on goals, focus on how do you motivate people to deliver results. So it's just all around eventually delivering, keeping the first two in mind.
Yeah.
So and I think that then eventually it boils down to translating a bunch of these things in processes, so that you are not the only driver who is doing, driving these things. There are mechanisms that you're putting in place. Not sure if you remember, but Jeff used to say,
Yeah.
good intentions don't work,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It was all around the fact that, look, people are already working super hard, so good intentions don't work. What works is processes and mechanisms.
Right.
Right. And this is ranging from, you know, reviewing every single metrics and operational metrics yourself, customer metrics, to, you know, customer connects at Amazon, where, every leader is supposed to spend X hours answering customers, in customer trainings and whatever else. Dedicated bandwidth to resolve customer issues on a team, SBRs and engineers participating in, customer connects or calls with customers. So there are lots of mechanisms you can put in.
Yeah.
How do you get teams to work closely with customers so they can hear live feedback from them and whatever else?
Thanks for that perspective. So what you just said is also one-on-one. We can translate that to career as well, right? So working backwards from the customer, right? You can apply that to working backwards from your goals about your career, right? So clearly writing down what exactly you want out of your career. Very few people do that, right? So it's and ultimately then breaking it down to what are the tangible milestones that I can achieve towards that career goal that I have. Really appreciate that, Ashish. That's an amazing answer. Thanks for sharing that. With that, we'll close this session.